everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. In this episode, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to disability advocate and author of the Disability Debrief newsletter, Peter Fremlin. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hi Peter, how are you?
Hi Evie, doing well, great to be here.
Oh, do you know, it's so lovely to have you, and I'm super excited to get to talk to you. We have so much to talk about, but before we get into any of that, what have you been up to today?
You've been having a good day. I've been working on my Disability Debrief project. I've been editing an interview I did with a disabled activist I spoke to in Brazil. And so it's just a pleasure to go over her words and to kind of understand the way she works.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah, because obviously we're going to get more into Disability Debrief later, and it's such an exciting project. But what would you say is your favourite part of doing it? Is it the interviewing, the researching, the editing? What part is your kind of favourite to do?
Yeah, I'm very much a people person, so it's these connections with people that it gives. Some that say I'm profiling, some people that are writing for it, some people that are responding to it, or kind of new conversations like this one that it sets up. I enjoy the writing work, but fundamentally my favorite thing is having a chat with people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's I kind of know firsthand, and I'm the same. It's just so amazing to get to hear other people's stories, isn't it?
Exactly. I also, like you, love asking questions and finding out where people are at and what makes them tick.
Absolutely. So when you kind of go about finding people to interview or kind of, raise their profile a little bit more, how do you go about finding people that you'd like to chat to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I've now been working internationally on disability things for over a decade, so just there's quite a big network there already. I think a lot of my work is sort of having conversations with people that I've known for a while, and then I follow introductions, and I'm quite proactive about following it. In social science, sometimes people call this like a snowball approach, that like the snowball is rolling and then it just sort of gathers more snow, and that's kind of my approach to a lot of things. Actually, I just follow connections. I ask people to introduce me, and then I see what happens. We're all connected in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why it makes me think of this, but it's really interesting. And I think it is true, that theory. I could be wrong here. People probably know more about this than me, but I think it's like the 4 degrees of separation theory, or 6, where
I
you're
think
only
I had 6. Yeah,
6. It might be 6. I don't know, but it's where you're only like 6 people away from anyone in the world, and I find that theory really interesting because, like you say, in a way, we are all kind of connected.
yeah, and so now meeting you, Evie, I feel I've gotten some closer to some people in degrees of separation, because you've spoken to so many on your podcast. I think there's also the the fact of disability activism around the world, that there are just a lot of connections, that the activism itself is based on people connecting with each other. This is both a very beautiful thing in the kind of shared community, and I kind of feel I could go to any country in the world and meet people connected to the same fight. And then it's also, there's the other side of it, which is, oh, maybe we didn't broaden it out enough. Like maybe we didn't get like enough people on board, because if it just stays among people then like maybe the activism is limited.
I get what you mean, because I think activism in that kind of sense, I think a big part of that probably is teamwork and people working together to, speak about issues that disabled people are having, raise awareness, educate people, and people working together to improve life for people with disabilities. But then also, yeah, if it does rely on teamwork, I guess it's about branching it out and making sure that that team includes people from all over the world.
Yeah, exactly. So, and like how to sort of, you got sort of groups of people that know each other and have known each other for a long time, and they're making things happen, but they might not be open to different perspectives. They might not be open to so many younger or different voices coming in. I'll be interested, Evie, as you take things forward and continue your work, whether then the sort of organizations working on disability kind of welcome you as a fresh new voice, or maybe they might feel, like we sort of prefer to keep the youngsters at arm's length. That will be sort of interesting to see how that develops. As sometimes when we get a position, we're not kind of welcoming to bring others along with us.
I know, yeah. I think it I Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I've spoken to some amazing disability activists, obviously you included. And it's always really interesting to hear people's takes and things. I would love to be maybe included in that team and as a disability activist as I kind of take things further, that would be an honor. But yeah, I think
You definitely are, Evie. You're already there. So
thank you. But no, like you say, everyone has different takes, everyone has different lived experience, and that's a really important thing as well, lived experience, and everyone has different ideas as well. And I think it's about listening to people from all different generations, also people with all different disabilities as well, and seeing what their ideas are, what their experiences are, and what they can kind of bring to the table.
exactly, disability is just such a huge and diverse group, and part of the point of looking at things with a disability lens is to kind of see that diversity and how things are very different for different people, right down to our differences on individual level. So yeah, for me that's just that's a very exciting challenge, and it's the challenge that sort of keeps me working on disability as well. Just that there's like so many new ways to understand the world, to understand what types of barriers people face, how people have gotten around them, and their different experiences.
Absolutely. And I know that you yourself have a disability. So would you mind telling me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in summary, I have a kind of physical disability since birth. In medical terms, it's a type of muscular dystrophy. The muscular dystrophy is a kind of very big umbrella term. I have one of the ones which is a bit milder. For much of my life, it meant I walked slowly and had difficulties on stairs. In more recent years, it kind of I've been getting sort of promotions up the disability ladder, and now I use a electric wheelchair full time, and so that's sort of different situation transition in the past few years. Of course, the other side of disability is it's not just an individual situation, but the social barriers and the social level of inclusion, and that I sort of for most of my life, I went to mainstream schools. I went to university. I wasn't in a disability community. I only found that as an adult. And so, like, I dodged many of the barriers that some disabled people face. I was able also to find work in a field of my choosing. I dodged many of the barriers, like I say, but there was always this kind of challenge of, like, you're socially participating, but are you fitting in? kind of thing. Like, are you often quite literally left on the sidelines? And so that was part of my disability experience as well. In part, sort of like some isolation by not being able to take part in, say, games so much, especially as a teenager. And then in part experiences like falling over, which really defined a lot of my childhood, but it's a very individual experience. And it's actually only recently that I've kind of found ways to talk about and share what that meant in my life.
Wow, I mean, yeah, I think I think I like to talk about childhood quite a lot on the podcast when it comes to people and their disabilities, because I think obviously childhood is a really kind of defining part of life. And when you have a disability, it can obviously be a lot different to a childhood that you may have if you were able bodied. So, you've talked about some of the kind of experiences there. And one I can really relate to is kind of that thing of wanting to fit in, but you feel like you're not. I think,
Mm-hmm.
especially in secondary school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a teenager right now, and it's a weird one because in reality, we are all different, and the fact that we are all unique makes us us. But when you're a teenager, I think you really wanna fit in. You really want to be just like everyone else. And obviously, when you have a disability, that is a kind of I don't know how to explain it, but it makes you feel like you're never gonna fit in because you're not like everyone else. And it's a really weird feeling where I don't know if you experience this, but where you kind of try your very, very hardest to just be like everyone else.
Mm. Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. I think that, like, for everyone, the teenage years are very big transitions. And I agree with you when I think of sort of those challenges. It is the sort of 13, 14, 15 years old that I really think about as sort of young people. So kind of sorting themselves into different groups. They're kind of very focused on, oh, like, are you following this new trend? Have you seen this thing on TV or wherever it is? And I think there's a confusing time for everyone. But then when you've got a disability experience as well, even if people are kind of nice about it and not getting into the bullying and whatnot, it can be hard to relate in the ways people are connecting, right? And it's one of the for me, like, very nice things about growing up is that you can then, like, choose your connections more widely and connect with people based on sort of shared interests or shared temperaments. And you just get into situations where it's less judgy. There's less peer pressure to behave in certain ways. I mean, depending which avenues you choose. And then the other factor that also, like, yourself better, and that can put you in a different situation. So when I look back on when I was your age, I kind of see, Evie, that okay, so I was in part socially isolated, but then in part in my head, I was telling myself I was more isolated than I was. I wasn't seeing the connections that I did have, or like the range of friendships that I was building. I didn't quite know how to see that positively. And it's like only with time you kind of realize, okay, part of the difference of age is that just having kind of more ability to see what you're doing well as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a weird period. Like I have, and I agree with what you said there about kind of actually in your head being more maybe isolated than you are, because you can have really good friends around you. And I'm lucky enough to have those great friends around me. But you end up kind of being quite you end up being quite doubtful of kind of, well, what do they think? Am I, do they want to hang out with me? Is You end up kind of doubting things, and you end up becoming, I think, quite self-critical of
Mm,
kind of, you need to keep these friendships going because they're amazing people and you want to keep this going because, and then there's the thing of, yeah, like keeping up with trends and stuff, where it can become quite frustrating because there are so many, like, there's like, for me, trends that are visual. So
mm-hmm,
my friends will be talking about it and I'll be like, guys, I have no idea what's going on. Can someone explain this to me? And they're so good because they will explain it and they will explain it
mm,
in detail. But then you end up going, if only I could just see it. Like, if only I could just
mm.
know what was going on. So it's a really weird thing where you've got this, and you have some really like great times as well. But you have this whole like mix of emotions going on.
That's the cocktail. That's the cocktail of adolescence. Evie, it's all going on as well. I think people are kind of positioning a lot. People don't necessarily like have the ability to then kind of like articulate if they like you in a way that can make you feel more secure, um, or and then sometimes you're not able to share your vulnerabilities. What I've kind of found later in life, so when I've kind of shared my stories about those falling overs and whatnot, I found that like the more that I can share my individual story, the more it connects me to other people, right?
Mm.
So, and I think I get the sense this is also what you're finding through these conversations on this podcast, but like that's sort of something that is sometimes the other side of the disability experience, that kind of okay, it puts us in a position where we are different, where we're facing barriers, where we're facing exclusion. But if we're able to put words on that, then it really can really impact people, because it can help them understand their own differences and their own positions, maybe in a way that they hadn't been forced into. But I like that your friends explain the trends, and you can say like that you don't follow them, rather than sort of just having to kind of bluff it out, or stay on the stay on the sidelines. But yeah, we've got a very visual culture, so I imagine that must come up quite a lot.
It does, and I definitely like, it's only in recent and maybe in the last couple of years that I felt brave enough to go, guys, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Can someone help me? Because like I definitely, for the first few years of high school, I was like, it's fine. It's visual. It'll be fine. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
sit here quietly. And then when I started to feel really secure in my friend group, I was like, no, I actually really want to know what's going on here because I am really confused. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I started asking people more, and yeah, it's great. They really like describe things in detail, some of them as well. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they're a really great bunch of people.
Lovely. I'm really happy you've got that group.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was interested in what you said earlier, but obviously in kind of the last few years, you've transitioned to being in an electric wheelchair. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that is, like you say, a really big transition. So, how are you finding that move from being able to walk to using a wheelchair?
Yeah. Wow. So my walking was kind of getting slower through my 20s and 30s, although a lot like you don't necessarily see, and you can be in kind of like denial about, and life is just very busy, so you're like, look, it's not that my walking is getting slower, it's just that I'm having a bad day, or that I'm tired, or because I've traveled somewhere, or whatever. But it was changing then. A few years ago, I fell and broke my leg in my house, and then it didn't heal, and I needed another operation. And basically, because of my disability, like regaining strength after accident like that, after a period that you're not using your muscles while you're recovering, that kind of knocks back the mobility a lot. So this kind of happened over a few years, and I was then like doing rehab. It was getting better, and then it stopped getting better, and then it got worse. Evie is very is difficult. Like, even though I was like, I'd been working on disability issues for many years, and I knew that being in a wheelchair wasn't a bad thing. Still, part of me didn't like love it as a thing that was happening to me. I knew that being in a wheelchair would cut me off from going to places that I love, many of which are inaccessible. I've kind of lived and worked in Bangladesh and Egypt and elsewhere. My life was very much based on travel. All of that is kind of really not impossible, but like just a new level of incredible complication. In a wheelchair, I then sort of needed sort of support and assistance from people in different ways than I had before. That's quite difficult for just sort of identity and navigating. It sort of really marked a transition into midlife for me, which kind of brings up all these exciting questions and awareness of just being mortal, which is obviously something we're all in, but you have different awarenesses of different stages in your life. And it was just sort of a series of big changes around the pandemic. That I'd been living in Egypt when the pandemic happened. I came back, I broke my leg in this country, and so that then really changed was from what my life was before, and that kind of combination of like lockdown, mobility change, back in England, living here now. So it was shall we say, a huge step, and very challenging from the mental health front. The other pluses, however, is that now like I can race about town on the wheelchair much quicker than I could kind of walk about before, and so it's given kind of a new range and speed. It makes it difficult to get in certain places, but it also, I can just like go for a long walk with friends, or I can kind of zoom in and out of town or around town in a way that I couldn't before. And now, after being in a situation for a few years, I'm kind of much more adapted to what this is, and exploring like the possibilities of life with a wheelchair, which are infinite, and sort of exploring this new phase of life.
Absolutely. I mean, it really can't be overestimated how much of a drastic change that is. But I think I think it's great that you are recognizing both the obviously difficulties of that and the cons of that, but also the pros of that you were able to maybe get around a bit quicker than you were before, and it opens up new opportunities. And I think it's great that you recognize both sides of that. But absolutely, it's a huge change, and really one that can't be understated. You mentioning Egypt there and kind of living there before the pandemic brings up another topic that I know you spent a lot of your career abroad. So, can you tell me a bit about that time and some of the experiences you had?
This as soon as I graduated from university, I went as far away as I could from this country. So I did a master's degree in Brazil in social anthropology. I was living in Rio de Janeiro and researching with disabled people there. It was sort of magnificent experience, very sort of convivial, very social, Brazilians like love to have a good time, and for a kind of reserved British person, that was very eye opening. From there, I got my first job in Bangladesh, and so another theme here is language learning. So for a lot of that time, I just first with Portuguese. My mum's Portuguese, but I had to take some language courses to learn, and that set me on track of just I really loved learning languages, meeting people where they were, hearing them in their own words. I just sort of I love the adventure of it. Love being a learner again. Love the kind of the mistakes and the hilarity and the kind of the eagerness, that feeling of grabbing up new words. So like I learned Bengali in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is kind of a whole other. It was for me just a whole other reality, and that's where I started work on disability issues. That's where a group of disabled people kind of saw me going up some stairs and kind of called me to visit their organization and spend time with them. That's how I joined the disability movement, actually, while I was traveling there. As you could kind of see, I got quite sort of carried away with this. After Bangladesh, I was like, I had to add a brief time in Switzerland for work. And then I was like, well, if I like learning languages, let's go for a tough one. And so that's where I went to Egypt to learn Arabic. And I was kind of working while I was language learning. But I just loved the process that like everyone I met was my teacher, right? That I could like go to take a taxi ride somewhere, and the taxi driver's making jokes about like sort of me not understanding something, or I'm having a conversation about something and learning from them, and learning the kind of the cultural things, different ways of understanding and interacting with the world. It was for over a decade that was kind of my kind of main attention, and loved the adventure of going somewhere new and seeing what happened.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it is really interesting, and especially if you love the adventure as well. And yeah, I that what you're speaking about there about learning languages, yeah, I think that's a really valuable skill to have, but also B, just really fun to do. I mean, I can tell that you really enjoyed doing it. And I think, yeah, it is a really great thing to do. You talk a lot about learning different things there, language and that kind of thing. But were there any kind of other lessons that you learned whilst being abroad? And do you have any kind of memorable moments or highlights?
Yeah, it really shaped who I was, how these different cultures and societies work, and the different ways of seeing the world. One memory I was thinking about recently was kind of moment that really led me to learn Bengali. I was in Bangladesh just teaching English for a few weeks. And some people had met me just literally like going around the street. They'd met me, and they were also interested in English literature. I was studying English literature, so they were telling me about Tennyson and whatnot, and it's all very exciting. And then they had a sort of Bengali poetry night, and they kind of took me along, and I didn't understand any Bengali except one or two words. One of the words, they taught me the word for love, which is balobasha. So I could kind of hear this word, just this flow of it, the b and the sh kind of flow out in the poetry. And then there's a power cut. So obviously coming from this country, I'm not sort of so used to that. But then they kind of lit some candles and carried on the poetry recitation. And there's just something about that night that really impacted me, this love of their culture and their language. I kind of later find that, well, actually also Bangladesh became independent in part because of that love for its language and that sort of independence in having the Bangla language. But I could kind of really feel it, and yeah, that's what made me want to go back and learn learn Bangla just I don't know, just before we were chatting, Evie, I was on TikTok, and there was just a Bangladeshi video came up, and I was just like, oh, I just love hearing this language again. It's such a pleasure. It really takes me back. So that was kind of one of the incidents that really changed my life, because it's one of the things that really made me go back and want to study the language, I spent 6 months there studying, and then after that I went to work. So that really, determined the path of my life.
I mean, wow, that sounds genuinely absolutely incredible. Now, I'm curious to know, obviously, you had done a lot of traveling during that time. Did you find that because of your disability, you faced any sort of barriers traveling wise, and were you nervous about any of the traveling that you did, or did it all go quite smoothly?
Now, absolutely yes, yes, and no. Um, so, like, partly I wanted to travel because I didn't know if I could, right? So there was a point, like, while I was at university, I started trying to travel. I grew up kind of traveling with my family. My parents sort of really love it. And I didn't know if I could travel by myself because, like I say, difficulties walking and climbing stairs, and like what will happen, and especially then in developing countries where the infrastructure isn't so good, like just random steps are everywhere. So I was scared, and I remember, just thinking I was going to sort of China on a break, and I was just thinking, look, if it doesn't work, I can just stay in a hotel for 2 weeks, and we'll see what happens. So that fear was definitely there. It was also one of the reasons that made me want to go, because I was like, I'm not going to not go because I'm scared. Yeah. So
Mhm.
this Evie, if you ever cross a bridge like this, realize, like, you still don't have to do it, even
Yeah.
if you are scared, because I think that logic took me took me into quite a few things, and like also you can still not do it. But for me, I really wanted to push that. I think, again, going back to say that example with Bangladesh, so I was kind of fell in love with this poetry, and then I went back and I was like, okay, so went back to 6 months. I've got a language course, and sort of I want to spend more time here afterwards. In my first week, I just then saw there were steps everywhere, and I was like, I just can't go anywhere by myself. And I was like, what have I done? Like, why have I come here? Why have I made this commitment? Like, this won't work. And then on week two, I realized, okay, wherever I go, there is also someone that will be willing to help. So this is kind of something a little bit different from British culture, where we're kind of all a bit sort of standoffish, and let people sort of like stew in their own juices a bit. And for us, it's like, it's more polite, kind of not necessarily to get involved in someone else's business. In Bangladesh, people are very much involved in each other's business in a different way from here. So wherever I went, there would be people. They were willing to help me get up steps, and I realized, okay, like this has given me a kind of new confidence in how I can get about, and through years, then make new types of relationship that is then doing things with other people. Maybe it's a driver, maybe it's a friend. I ended up getting adopted by a family there. Maybe it's a colleague, that they helped me, get about and manage those issues in a way that I couldn't have done, like physically by myself, or in maybe the way that I'd been used to do it in Britain. So those sort of disability things were definitely a factor. But then the other factor takes us back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Like, disability then gave me new ways to connect with people. It gave me a reason to work. It gave me a subject to work on. And in those years, there was just that sort of like expanse that opened up for me of this field of activism and advocacy, and learning and research that I could be part of. So, like, after a time, it then gave me like many new reasons to travel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can totally imagine. So obviously, speaking of disability and disability activism, you publish a newsletter called the Disability Debrief. So can you tell me about how it began and how it's progressed since it was first established?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Evie, and I really hope listeners will take a look at this, as this is my project now. It's the most meaningful work I've done in my life. It started just as a way to share news and research with colleagues. There was kind of a lot going on and disability stuff, so I thought, oh, let's get together the latest reports and share it with people. And I really thought it was a kind of professional resource. But then, like friends at first and family, they were showing me, oh, like there are other people that would be interested in this. It's not just like that group of people working on it that are interested in what's happening on disability. So since then, it's kind of evolved into something much more like a media platform. It's a weekly newsletter, but now I can use it as a way to share voices of disabled people from all over the world, share news on disability from all over the world, and really from the inside of a social movement understand how people are working to change the world and to learn from them, to do some reporting on it. By doing this, I became a journalist. I didn't train as a journalist. I wasn't a journalist before, but just by being in the hot seat, I then learned how to report on different topics and breaking news. And it's become a project. One of my little taglines for it is stories that you won't see anywhere else. So like today, I published an article written by a teacher in special education in Tanzania, talking about schools there, who they're including, who they're letting down. Last week, I did some reporting on the United States freeze of foreign aid and how that's affecting disabled people. Next week will be a very personal essay from someone in the US who's stuck in their home because of their disability. So as you can see, it's a really wide range, and really now bringing in voices of disabled people from around the world and hearing from them directly. So like I say, I hope listeners will join me for the adventure. It can be found on disabilitydebrief.org.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is such an interesting project and it is absolutely brilliant, and for anyone listening, I would absolutely encourage you to check it out. It is really incredible. But obviously, yeah, you talk like you mentioned there about kind of a really wide range of topics, and you mentioned there about letting people share their stories and allowing your audience to hear other people's voices. What do you think is the kind of importance of hearing from a wide range of people and, people from all over the world? What do you think is the importance of sharing those stories?
Yes, there's a few different things here. I think that, so on one level, like within the stories we hear about disabled people, a lot of those are kind of disabled people from the UK or disabled people from the US. So just like from my travels, I knew like there's a whole world out there we're not hearing directly from disabled people in the global south or countries that aren't as well off. So just wanted to sort of, I really open up that dimension and have a platform where people can illustrate and tell stories in their own words. In that kind of broader sense though, like I think that sort of, I mean, as you know, on disability things, people like to speak for us. They like to guess what we want or what we need. And so this kind of claiming our voices is such an important part of pushing back against that. Even this thing about that you're saying, look, okay, in my group of friends, I've got a different experience. That just means we have to then like work to tell the story in our words, and what makes it different. I also feel sometimes like when we're sort of talking about policy or talking about disability in general, we kind of get very yeah, we start sort of stereotyping as a group. We're like, oh, all disabled people are like this or like that. And I think just hearing from individual voices for me is so important, and one of the reasons that I really like the project is it gets us out of those generalizations. And I've realized when I was doing my advocacy work or writing policies, some of the things I was saying about disabled people as a whole, I was like, well, I wouldn't like anyone to talk about me like that. Right? Sort of saying, oh, disabled people are especially vulnerable or something. It's like, okay, well, maybe, but also I wouldn't love for someone to say that about me. And so this kind of bringing out these voices of individuals is a really important corrective to the stereotypes that we have, even from within the disability community, right? Let alone the outside world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, disability is complex. It's not a kind of one size fits all kind of thing. And even within not just disability as a whole, but even within specific disabilities, like if I use the example of visual impairment here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an example I've used a couple times, but it's the one I know best. And even within that, there are like, I don't even know how many conditions there are within that spectrum, but I can tell you now there are a lot. And there, every condition affects people differently, and no two people with that condition are going to be the same. It's a really complex kind of spectrum, and
But
you
and
know,
I would say even I think it's kind of quite important. It's not just about like the condition, but saying how you respond to the social situation, right? Which is very different person to person, because often like we go through an experience, we think, oh, everyone facing this kind of access barrier or not being able to get into this or not being able to follow a visual trend will feel a certain way, but that isn't the case. Even though the that experience might be shared, some people get angry, some people don't care, some people find a way to get their friends to explain it to them, right? Do you kind of see what I mean? It's that sort of,
mm,
there's this just incredible social diversity, as well as that huge diversity just in each condition is very different.
yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I think because on top of the condition, obviously, you've got the fact that we're all human anyways, we're all different, and we all our approach to things is different. We all think differently. So
Mm-hmm.
when you put that on top of on top of the condition, it really, we are all so unique in our approach to things. And yeah, what you said there, I guess it's just about kind of educating people that everyone will have different access requirements and different access needs. But I think, like we were talking about earlier about lived experience, that's why I think it is so important to hear from people who have lived with a certain disability, who require certain access needs, because otherwise you're never going to fully understand what people need.
Yeah, and just what people need, but also like how they understand the world, how they're reacting to it, their imagination, their coping strategies, their dreams, right? This kind of richness of the like human experience, and our disabilities go through all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you there. And it's it's a really, really good point to make. Now, obviously, Disability Debrief talks about disability on an international level. You discuss disability and how it kind of differs all around the world. In what ways would you say then that the kind of level of disability advocacy differs from country to country?
Yeah, there are quite important differences. So like one of the important differences is just sort of how established things are. So in this country, like all the social services, all the government programs, all the disability benefits are kind of really built up over the past decades. So it's kind of quite hard to shift, and you end up like fighting over very small issues, right? So you
Mhm.
end up fighting, oh, let's tweak this sub benefit, right? But in other countries where there aren't so many systems built up, you've kind of got a lot more to play for because like the rules of the game haven't been set yet. So you might be trying to get like the first disability legislation across the border. You might be trying to really sort of refresh the way that benefits are given. So in sometimes it can kind of feel like advocacy from other countries has that kind of liveliness and energy and potential that you don't always feel here in this country, where in some ways we're kind of on the back foot, and governments over the past 10-20 years have kind of taken things away from us. Those are some of the differences. But then there's what sort of just a lot of shared commonality, right? Like that we are trying to be seen as people. We're trying to be seen as people with rights. We're trying to have access to work, to education, to public life, to be able to vote, to be able to make decisions about our own lives. And this is kind of in common everywhere, right? That sort of disabled people aren't always seen as people whose voices we should listen to, aren't always given the right to make a decision about their own life. And then obviously then questions about accessibility and supports and benefits are present everywhere. And yeah, people then fighting to achieve them.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are kind of obviously there are going to be differences, but I guess there are quite a lot of shared struggles and shared kind of experiences from country to country. Talking about kind of disability itself, then, have you noticed any differences in kind of how disability is seen or how disability is thought of in different parts of the world?
Yeah, so it kind of really, yeah, it kind of really struck me, say, in Bangladesh, I met people who's kind of had physical disabilities less sort of severe than mine, but because of those who'd been were teased or had to leave school. So there is still in some places, and including in some places in this country, just this real violence of it. There are sort of big differences in kind of how you respond to things, like how much you take it as kind of individual issue versus how much you take it as a kind of communal issue. I think kind of maybe like I was hinting about before, part of the sort of British ways of doing things is like, oh, everyone become very independent, each person is their own island, and so disabled people should also be like their own island and do everything themselves. Whereas in different countries there's much more expectation that, oh, you solve things as a group, as a family, as a community. And there's less kind of pressure on each individual to do things. And as I moved about between countries, I'd really kind of feel the difference in like, yeah, if people got involved, how people got involved, how they reacted to difference. There's, I think, like one sort of nice thing we have in this country is we've got lots of disabled people in public life. So there's disabled journalists or people in media or disabled people in Strictly Come Dancing or whatever it is. And that's kind of really established and is kind of like, yeah, the norm these days. And I think that's a real strength that we have in this country. And other places it kind of hasn't got to that same level necessarily, where disabled people have been able to take those positions.
Ah, okay. I mean, that's really interesting to hear you speak about because honestly, I don't really have much of an idea how disability is thought of and how much it's talked about in other countries.
But yeah, definitely. It's a topic I talk about a lot, and I know that, but like I think just seeing people with disabilities kind of in the public eye and having that representation there for everyone to see, where sometimes it's not really even, like specific like shows like Strictly and stuff, like where you have a disabled character on TV where it's not like necessarily every time they're there talked that the disability they have is talked about. Sometimes it is, to raise awareness, and I think that's great to talk about too, talking about disability and letting people hear those conversations, but also just seeing disabled people and seeing them go about their lives and not necessarily having disability at the forefront. I think that's a great way to kind of help it become more normalized. And I think, we are quite lucky that we do have a lot of that in the UK, I think. And hopefully that will become to, be the same way in other countries as well.
Yeah, exactly. You're totally right that like the point of that presence isn't so that disability becomes the issue all of the time. It's like precisely the opposite. The point of that presence is to kind of normalize it and to just sort of change expectations about who we see in different places.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what would you say then are some of the kind of most, pressing issues within the disability world at the minute?
Yeah, so alongside those kind of old struggles of like fighting for our voice to be heard, the accessibility barriers, the supports people need to get by and live and to thrive. I think the world is kind of in this sort of exciting and risky place at the moment, and those will really impact on disabled people. So if we think about the impacts of climate change, those will really hit disabled people in the community that might have less less resources or ability to kind of react or to move or deal with a storm or a power cut or whatever happens. These changes that we're seeing in the States with Trump's election mark a real turn and backlash on kind of talking about diversity issues. Disability is kind of sometimes in the target on that, sometimes out of the targets, coming in and out of focus. I think that will be a really key challenge on disability going forward, like how these new sort of narratives and new political positions include or exclude us. I think the world is in a very fluid situation at the moment, Evie, and there's sort of brewing crises on different levels. A lot of the old expectations are being sort of thrown out, so it's kind of very much all to play for, and disabled people are going to be caught on the front lines of that in many ways, both in people affected by the crises, and in people responding to the crises and showing new ways of doing things.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the world is changing quite a lot at the minute. I suppose it always is, but there are lots of big kind of things happening in the world, and it will be interesting to see, 10, 20 years in the future, how disability is seen and how people with disabilities are kind of thriving and living their lives. And hopefully, it will, I think, the kind of life for disabled people, hopefully it will continue to improve in the future. But yeah, I think we're at a point in the minute where lots of things are changing, and it's a really interesting topic to talk about.
Exactly, and there's sort of the technological changes are also happening very quickly, and as some of the most important changes impacting disabled people, whether that's kind of new text to speech technology, or like new access possibilities, or etc. some of them can also be bad. But say just in the last 20 years, taking our lives online has let people connect in very different ways. People say do online shopping or etc. So it's gotten past some of the traditional barriers. It has also created some new ones, as not all of that new world is accessible, as you were just discussing. The trends and the latest social media have created a new form of exclusion. But yeah, technology is then the other sort of big theme.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's a really interesting thing to delve into. I am not techie in the slightest. I can just
Mm-hmm.
around technology, but it's a really interesting thing to look into, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So my sort of next question for you is one that I ask pretty much all of my guests, and it's one of my favorites to ask. And that is, what would you say has been your proudest moment in your life so far?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have one moment, but I'm kind of really the things I feel proudest about is where yeah that what I do or the way I am in the world has touched someone else, when someone sort of picks up an idea that I shared and takes it forward, or when I've been able to be part of someone's journey, someone I worked with in the past year, so taken incredible improvement in the way that they can write and tell their own story, and sort of I had a small part in that, and I feel very proud to have had a part in that. So like I said at the beginning, I'm a people person, and yeah, where I see that those connections have been made, and people are taking them forward, is when I feel yeah really really proud to be part of that.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a great thing to be proud of as well. And it feels great when you know that you've been able to help someone, been able to give someone an idea, been able to give someone a helping hand. I think that's a really great feeling in itself as well.
Yeah,
So,
or and be part of their journey, whether that's they sometimes kind of calling it help doesn't necessarily like sum it up, because it's kind of going in both directions. And yeah, we were part of each other's journeys, and as they were also part of mine.
yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really good point. So, looking forward then, do you have any goals or aspirations for the future that you'd like to achieve?
Yeah, I'm excited to take the Disability Debrief project forward. It's just very meaningful work. It's really kind of growing in its readership, and the kind of the new disability stories that we can develop and share. The artists and writers that I work with, I'm really excited to see where that goes. On a personal level, I've kind of got sort of writing I'd like to do, and creative projects to pursue. I've started doing some spoken word poetry. I would love to take that forward. So yeah, that's a goal. That's a goal as well, to really kind of carrying on, yeah, exploring the world, exploring myself, and finding new ways of relating to it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they sound like some really, really exciting aspirations, and I wish you the best of luck with them. And thank you so, so, so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure to get to talk to you. I mean, you have some really kind of interesting thoughts and ideas and opinions, and you're really insightful. And it's been great to, listen to you talk a little bit about your story and disability debrief. And it's been great to kind of hear your thoughts on certain topics. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much to you, Evie. It's really real pleasure to talk with you today.
Oh, it's been amazing. And thank you to my audience for listening. And I will see you all next time.